I met him on a Saturday afternoon in the picture frame aisle at Hobby Lobby, of all places. I was looking for something to brighten up my apartment, running my fingers along the gold leaf frames when this guy next to me muttered something about the price tags being upside down. When I looked over, he had this shy smile and these warm brown eyes that immediately made me think he'd be easy to wrap around my finger. Within 5 minutes, I had him asking me to coffee, and by that evening, we were sharing dinner at some Italian place where he kept staring at me like I was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. His name was Marcus, and he worked in supply chain management for some tech company, which sounded boring as hell, but probably paid well. The way he hung on every word I said, the way he insisted on paying for everything, the way he kept texting me before I even got home that night. I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. Those first 3 years were exactly what I deserved. Marcus took me to Jamaica twice, Costa Rica, Paris for a long weekend that probably cost him 3 months' salary. He'd planned these elaborate road trips to places I'd mentioned wanting to see, always staying in the nicest hotels, always making sure I had whatever I wanted. The sex was decent enough, and he was so grateful for everything. So amazed that someone like me would even give him the time of day. I'd catch him staring at me sometimes, with this dopey expression like he'd won the lottery. And honestly, I could have been with anyone. The personal trainer at my gym was always flirting with me. My friend Sarah's brother, who worked in finance, kept asking her for my number. But I stayed with Marcus because he was useful, and he worshipped me the way I deserved to be worshipped when he started talking about marriage after 2.5 years. I wasn't surprised. He wanted this big wedding with all his family flying in from Ohio, some ridiculous church ceremony that would cost a fortune and be all about other people gawking at us. I convinced him that a simple courthouse ceremony would be more romantic, more intimate. Just the two of us making this commitment without all the drama and expense. Really, I just wanted the legal protections without the hassle. Marriage meant security, meant half of everything he owned, meant I could stop worrying about whether he'd eventually wise up and find someone else. Standing there in that sterile courthouse saying those vows, I was already thinking about the cute clerk who'd been checking me out while we waited for our turn. 1.5 years later, I was staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, feeling like my entire world was collapsing. This wasn't part of the plan. I was 26. I looked amazing. I had freedom to do whatever I wanted. And now there was going to be some screaming, demanding little parasite ruining my body and my life. When I told Marcus, I was sure he'd agree that termination was the obvious choice. We could try again in a few years when we were more established. When I was ready, but he got this soft look in his eyes and took my hands and said, "Maybe this is happening for a reason. Babe, maybe we're more ready than we think." The way he said it, so gentle and hopeful, made it impossible to argue without looking like a monster. So I found myself nodding along, agreeing to keep it, while inside I was screaming at how my carefully planned life was being derailed by his sentimental bullshit. Pregnancy was 9 months of hell. I was sick constantly. My body was doing disgusting things, and Marcus was so excited about everything that it made me want to scream. He'd read pregnancy books and tried to tell me about fetal development while I was trying to keep down saltines. He'd want to feel the baby kick and talk to my stomach like there was already a person in there. The worst part was how everyone expected me to be glowing and maternal and thrilled, when really I felt like an alien was taking over my body. When Elena finally arrived that April, Marcus cried when he held her for the first time. I felt nothing except relief that it was over, and resentment that everyone expected me to be instantly transformed into some kind of Earth Mother goddess. Marcus was a natural with Elena in a way that made me feel even more defective. He'd get up for night feedings without complaining, change diapers like it was no big deal, spend hours just staring at her while she slept. Meanwhile, I felt trapped and exhausted and angry that this tiny person demanded so much and gave nothing back. When Marcus traveled for work, which was pretty regularly, I'd count the hours until he came home to take over. I started going to the gym more, just to get out of the house, just to remember who I was before I became someone's mother. That's where I met Derek. Derek was everything Marcus wasn't. Tall, built like a Greek statue, confident in a way that made every woman in the gym turn to look when he walked by. He was a personal trainer there, and he started noticing my workouts, offering tips, complimenting how dedicated I was. After a few weeks, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee after our sessions, and I said yes because why shouldn't I? I deserved to have adult conversations with someone who saw me as more than just Elena's mom or Marcus's wife. Derek listened when I talked about feeling trapped, about how hard it was being alone with a toddler so much while Marcus traveled. He understood that I needed intellectual stimulation, that I was too young and vibrant to just disappear into motherhood. Those coffee dates turned into longer conversations. Then lunch when Elena was at daycare. Then afternoon meetups at his apartment when Marcus was away on business trips. Derek made me feel alive again. Made me remember that I was still desirable and interesting and worth pursuing. With him, I wasn't just going through the motions of being a wife and mother, I was myself again. The sex was incredible. Passionate in a way it hadn't been with Marcus in years. Derek would tell me I was beautiful. That I was wasted on some boring tech guy who didn't appreciate what he had. When I was with Derek, I could forget about sippy cups and bedtime routines, and the endless, grinding routine of domestic life. I got careless because I felt invincible. Marcus was in Cincinnati for some 3-day supply chain summit, and Derek and I had been texting all week about what we'd do with a whole weekend together. Friday night, we ordered Thai food and wine, and Derek spilled sauce all over his shirt laughing at something I said. I spilled wine on mine, trying to help him clean up, and suddenly we were both stripping out of our messy clothes, giggling like teenagers. We were in the kitchen in just our underwear, when Derek suggested we bake cookies. He'd seen this recipe online that looked amazing. And wasn't there something sexy about baking together? Before I knew it, we were completely naked. Flour in my hair, chocolate chips scattered across the counter, feeling wild and free and completely alive. Elena was asleep upstairs. Marcus wasn't supposed to be home until Saturday evening, and for the first time in years, I felt like myself again, instead of some watered-down version playing house. Then I heard Marcus's car in the driveway, the key turning in the front door, his voice calling out, "Babe, I'm home early." Derek and I froze, staring at each other across the kitchen island covered in cookie dough and our discarded clothes. This couldn't be happening. He wasn't supposed to be back until tomorrow. Derek was grabbing for his pants when Marcus walked into the kitchen and stopped dead, his overnight bag sliding off his shoulder onto the floor. "What the hell is going on?" Marcus's voice was quiet, confused, like he was trying to process what he was seeing. "We were just baking cookies." I said, because we literally were baking cookies. And maybe if I stayed calm and reasonable, I could make him see that this wasn't what it looked like. I spilled dinner on my clothes, and so did Derek. So we were washing them and decided to finish the cookies while we waited. It sounded perfectly logical to me, but Marcus was staring at us like we were speaking a foreign language. Derek was trying to edge toward the hallway with his clothes bundled against his chest, but Marcus moved faster than I'd ever seen him move, grabbing Derek by the shoulder and shoving him hard against the refrigerator. "Get the fuck out of my house," he shouted. And Derek bolted, running naked through our living room and out the front door into the night. I could hear him starting his car and speeding away while Marcus turned back to me, his face red and furious in a way I'd never seen before. "Cookies," he said, his voice shaking. "You're going to stand there naked in our kitchen with some random guy and tell me you were baking cookies." "Marcus, you're being ridiculous," I said, wrapping a dish towel around myself. "Derek is a friend from the gym. We were having dinner. We spilled food on ourselves. And yes, we were baking cookies while our clothes were in the wash. You're acting like you caught us doing something terrible when we were literally just cooking." I kept my voice level and reasonable because Marcus was clearly having some kind of emotional breakdown, and someone needed to be the adult here. But he wasn't buying it. He kept shaking his head, running his hands through his hair, muttering things like, "I can't believe this," and naked baking cookies like he was trying to make sense of a foreign concept. Finally, he looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, exactly, but something colder. "I can't do this right now," he said. "I can't even look at you right now." He grabbed his keys and walked out, leaving me standing there in my dish towel, completely bewildered by his overreaction to what was obviously an innocent misunderstanding. He didn't come home that night, which was typical Marcus drama. He'd probably gone to his friend Jake's house to sulk and get sympathy for being married to such a terrible wife who had the audacity to have friends and bake cookies. I spent Saturday morning calling our mutual friends to give them a heads up that Marcus was having some kind of mental health crisis. I explained how he'd come home from his business trip in a weird mood and completely lost it when he found me cooking with a friend. How he'd physically attacked Derek for no reason. How he was probably going to start telling people crazy stories about me cheating because he couldn't handle the fact that I had a life outside of him and Elena. Sarah was sympathetic. She'd always said Marcus seemed controlling and promised to reach out to him. By noon, I'd talked to 6 friends and felt confident that when Marcus came to his senses, the people who mattered would understand what really happened. Then the process server showed up at my door. Divorce papers. Filed that morning, Marcus was asking for full custody of Elena, citing adultery and claiming I was an unfit mother. I stared at the legal documents, unable to believe that my husband of 2.5 years was throwing away our entire marriage over a simple misunderstanding. He was clearly having some kind of nervous breakdown, but this was extreme even for him. The papers mentioned evidence of infidelity and recorded threats against the minor child, which made no sense at all. What recorded threats? What evidence? We'd had a miscommunication about a perfectly innocent situation, and now he was trying to destroy my life and take my daughter away. It wasn't until I met with my lawyer that I learned about the voice-activated recorder Marcus had apparently hidden in our bedroom. Months ago. Months. He'd been planning this, collecting evidence, building a case against me like I was some kind of criminal instead of his wife, who deserved trust and respect. The recordings included phone conversations I'd had with Derek, arguments Marcus and I had about his traveling, and one particularly bad day when Elena had been screaming for hours, and I'd said something about how if Marcus ever tried to turn her against me, I'd discipline her in a way she wouldn't forget. It was just venting, the kind of thing every frustrated parent says when they're at the end of their rope. But apparently Marcus's lawyer thought it sounded threatening. The custody hearing was a nightmare. Marcus sat there looking sad and responsible, while his lawyer painted me as some kind of monster who'd abandoned her family for an affair. They played excerpts from the recordings, my voice talking about how trapped I felt, how Marcus didn't appreciate me, how Derek made me feel alive again. They made it sound sordid and calculating, when really it was just me trying to find happiness in a marriage that had become suffocating. When they played the recording of me saying I'd slap that kid so hard she won't cry for a week if Marcus tried to alienate Elena from me, the judge actually winced. But that was taken completely out of context. I was frustrated and exhausted. And every parent says things they don't mean when they're overwhelmed. Marcus got full custody. I got supervised visitation twice a week for 2 hours each time, with some court-appointed social worker watching my every interaction with my own daughter. No alimony. Because apparently adultery invalidates any claim to spousal support in our state. I was supposed to be grateful I got anything at all. According to Marcus's smug lawyer, I walked out of that courthouse knowing that the system had failed me completely, that a good mother was being punished because her husband couldn't handle the fact that she found friendship and support outside their marriage. The supervised visits were humiliating. Elena would cling to me for the first few minutes, asking why mommy couldn't come home, why she had to stay with daddy and Aunt Lisa all the time. But then she'd get distracted by toys or snacks, and I'd spend 2 hours trying to connect with a 3-year-old, while some social worker took notes about every word I said. Sometimes I'd have to reschedule because of work conflicts, or when I was feeling too emotionally fragile to perform for the supervisor. Elena would cry when I had to leave. But honestly, those visits were almost harder on me than they were on her. She was young enough that she'd adjust. But I was the one being treated like a criminal for having normal human needs. After 6 months of showing up to those degrading supervised visits, dealing with Elena's questions I couldn't answer honestly, and watching her slowly forget that I used to be the center of her world, I'd had enough. The court suspended my visitation rights, claiming I'd missed too many appointments and wasn't prioritizing Elena's needs. But how was I supposed to prioritize anything when the system was designed to make me fail? They scheduled visits during my work hours, expected me to pretend everything was normal, while some stranger judged my every word, and acted like I was supposed to be grateful for 2 hours a week with my own child. Now it's been 2 years since the divorce was finalized, and Elena is starting kindergarten next month. She's 5 years old, and according to the few mutual friends who still talk to me, she calls Marcus's new girlfriend Rachel Mama Rachel and barely remembers me at all. Marcus has completely poisoned her against me, exactly like I knew he would. And everyone acts like he's this amazing single dad instead of the manipulative control freak who destroyed our family because he couldn't handle sharing me with anyone else. I've tried to move on. I've posted about my experience on social media, hoping to connect with other mothers who've been alienated from their children by vindictive ex-husbands. The response has been incredible. So many women sharing similar stories about how the family court system is biased against mothers, especially attractive mothers who don't fit the stereotype of the selfless, sexless Madonna. I've gotten hundreds of messages from women who understand that sometimes you have to seek emotional fulfillment outside a marriage that's become a prison. And that doesn't make you a bad mother or an unfit person. The hardest part is knowing that Elena is growing up thinking I abandoned her, when really I was driven away by a system that punished me for being human. Marcus gets to play the perfect father, while his new girlfriend steps into the role that should have been mine. They probably tell Elena stories about how mommy made bad choices and had to go away, instead of the truth that daddy couldn't handle mommy having friends and destroyed our family, rather than work on our problems like adults. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Marcus had come home Saturday night like he was supposed to. If Derek and I had finished our cookies and cleaned up the kitchen and gotten dressed before anyone was the wiser, we could have worked through our problems, gone to counseling, found a way to make our marriage work. But Marcus chose the nuclear option. chose to believe the worst about me instead of trusting the woman he'd promised to love and honor. He chose to tear apart our family rather than fight for it. And now Elena is the one who suffers, growing up without her real mother because her father couldn't forgive one moment of poor judgment. I know that someday Elena will be old enough to hear my side of the story, to understand that sometimes good people make mistakes that get twisted into something ugly by others. She'll realize that her father stole her childhood from her real mother, that she was raised by a woman who could never love her the way I do. Until then, all I can do is wait and hope that the truth eventually comes out. That people will see Marcus for who he really is, instead of the victim he's pretended to be for the past 2 years. Elena deserves to know that her mother fought for her, that I never stopped loving her even when the system made it impossible for us to be together. She deserves to know that everything that happened was her father's choice, not mine. And that if he'd been willing to forgive and work on our marriage like a mature adult, we could have been a family. Instead, she's growing up in a broken home with a stepmother and a father who destroyed her real family because he couldn't handle the reality that marriage takes work and compromise from both people. Someday she'll understand. Someday they all will,